Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the September meeting of Children and Young People on Teams. Bore da croeso i'r cyfarfod plant a pobl ifanc ar Teams bore yma. My name's Tudor Thomas and I am Chair of Children and Young People, and obviously I will chair this meeting today. If I could ask people now, unless you're actually speaking, to mute your microphone and also to put your camera off, because then that obviously helps with issues. And obviously we'll use electronic hands today. Rather than introduce everybody as at the start, we will then, if you come in to speak, then obviously please give your name and say who you are. Okay.
May I make the note that I'm substituting?
Yes, I was just going to come to that. Thanks, Councillor Easton. Martin Grocott is sent apologies for today, and Councillor Tony Easton is acting as a substitute for him. Okay, we go to apologies. The only apology I have is Martin Grocott, unless I'm informed otherwise. Second item on the agenda, declarations of interest, and I declare an interest here which is personal and is non-prejudicial, in that I am a member of the governing body of Ysgol Gymraeg Efenni in Abergavenny. Anyone else?
Yes. Can I give my apology? Give my declaration of interest. I'm a governor at King Henry School, but it's personal, non-prejudicial.
Thank you, Councillor Powell.
Yeah. While I'm on, can I just say to Hazel, there's no hand facility for when we wish to speak. So, okay. Thank you.
Right, okay. Councillor Jones.
Good morning, Chair. Bore da, David Jones. I'm the County Councillor for the Criconi Ward, and declaring a personal and non-prejudicial interest as Governor at Ysgol Gymraeg Efenni.
Okay, thank you.
Diolch.
Councillor Maggie Harris.
Good morning. Thank you. Good morning. I also declare loud a personal and non-prejudicial that I am Governor at Derry School.
Okay, thank you. So that concludes agenda item 2. I go to item 3, which is the public open forum. And although there isn't a person here, we have had a letter, and discussing this with the scrutiny officer, we both thought it was better if I just read a brief resume of the letter that we've received, because obviously the members of the committee have a copy of the letter, but members of public viewing on Teams this morning, on live stream rather, don't. So I'll just read this briefly. A letter from Mary-Ann Brocklesby regarding the new school development in Abergavenny, and this is a resume of it. She's a member of Abergavenny Town Council, Governor of Derry View School, but writing in a personal capacity. First point, proposals for the new school are clear, but they are less clear of the benefits for Derry View, which is the primary school that will merge into the new development. Fails to set the strategic direction for the new school in a number of areas. One, evidence base. The evidence base is weak for the development based on assumptions that the new school will provide better outcomes. 2, that MCC has not showed due diligence or undertaken robust assessments in a school which has 46% free school meal provision. Secondly, second major point, nursery provision. Mary-Ann Brocklesby is unhappy with non-maintained nursery provision, particularly in an area of disadvantage. That she points out that maintained provision is mandatory, that this will have a negative effect on vulnerable and disadvantaged children just above the Flying Start threshold. Third major point, involvement and collaboration of children. Scant evidence that parents of children at Derry View have been consulted. Feeling at the meeting that Mary-Ann Brocklesby attended was that parents felt hurt and excluded from the process. MCC has no sense of what the loss of Derry View might mean to the local community. parental concern about safety of their children and the effect on community cohesion by the merger of Derryview into the new Abergavenny school development. Again, parents have felt excluded from the process. The proposal as it stands is neither consistent with MCC's sustainable development policy of involvement and collaboration or sufficiently robust. And her parting point is that parents deserve better. So I think that's a fair resume of what she said in a somewhat longer letter. I'm going to hand over now as we go into agenda item 4 to look at the new school development. And obviously this is a monumental development for the two schools, King Henry VIII Secondary School and Derryview Primary School, and in fact for the community as a whole in Abergavenny. So I think it's very important today that we scrutinise this very closely. But I hand over now to Mr. Will McLean, who is the Chief Officer for Children and Young People. Thanks very much.
Good morning and thank you, Chair, and good morning members and members of the public who are watching this meeting this morning, and thank you for the opportunity to come to the meeting today and to set out the emerging themes we heard during our consultation event, or consultation events rather, about the new school in Abergavenny. I think that the one thing I would like to say just before I start, and the report that was shared with members, I will just turn the pages of before we kind of move into questions and so on. I won't respond to the public open forum item. I think many of those matters are covered in terms of the documents which are being produced and so on. And I know that Mary Ann Brocklesby attended, I think, virtually every event that we held, be they virtual, physical, and has submitted written submissions as well. So her voice will be heard through this consultation process. Okay, I'm going to share my screen now, if that's okay. So hopefully you'll be able to see the slides, and I'll just talk to those briefly and take us through where we are. So as I said, this is feedback to the Select Committee on the work that we have done during our consultation exercise around our proposal to establish a new 4 to 19 school in Abergavenny with a specialist centre for pupils with complex neurodevelopmental needs. And it's our plan that we establish this new school on the current King Henry VIII school site. The purpose of this report is to update members. Many members of this committee have participated in the consultation events, be it as governors of schools or at the public forum events that we've also undertaken. Just a couple of things I'd like to draw out really is that we extended this consultation exercise. So rather than being the statutory 6 weeks, we extended it to 9 weeks. So you can see there it ran from the 26th of April till the 25th of June. So there was more opportunity for people to engage with us. And just to pick up one point from the submission that we heard earlier, we went above and beyond to make sure that everybody in the Derryview area could engage with us. We held additional events, we moved the dates of events. Some of you may recall there was a fairly extensive COVID outbreak in the area towards the end of that period. So I do feel that we did afford everybody who wanted that opportunity that chance to come and speak to us and to share their views. So we went through a good and thorough process, I think, and we'll pick up how we did some of that a little bit later. What I guess this process is about today is about me sharing those themes with you as select members, reflecting on any final observations that you have before we finalise our next steps, which will be to take a set of recommendations through to Cabinet on the 6th of October. I think the document, the Word document that accompanied the papers that we shared for today's meeting is really important. I'm grateful for all the work that my colleagues in the Children and Young People's Department have gone through to provide responses to all of those different questions. And that will obviously be a key part of the report that we pull together as we progress these. So I think I'll rehearse some of these slides because I think it is important, and I think in particular the timeline's important, and just for people to be cognizant of what we were seeking to achieve during this consultation, because fairly, and it's not lost on me in terms of the numbers of some of the responses that we had, and some of those that were for and against the proposal. The proposal and the consultation were specifically around the governance of the new school. So many of the things which people have voiced concerns around are not pertinent to the discussion at the moment. They will be pertinent as the proposal develops. So things around the use of space, traffic flows, and all of those kind of things will come in time. But for this actual exercise, this was about the governance of the two schools and how they were best configured. So in terms of the need for change, and much of this harks back to 2017 when we made the decision to pursue an all-through school in Abergavenny, is predicated and based on the vision and the corporate plan that Monmouthshire has adopted. So fundamentally, we want to provide every child with the best possible start in life. We want to make sure that children choose to attend Monmouthshire schools, and obviously having the renewal of the school in Abergavenny, we believe will help contribute to that. But clearly we want to invest in all of our children's learning and development to make sure that they have the learning environment, the skills and the support that they need to flourish and be ready for the future of work. And that's work locally, globally, anywhere in a rapidly changing world. As I've mentioned, in 2017, we agreed through our cabinet and submitted to Welsh Government a strategic outline programme, and that identified a number of areas which were kind of pressing needs for change. There was a trend of regression for pupil progress between years 6 and 7. That's the end of primary school and the first year of secondary school. We wanted to support those families and those communities who are experiencing greater levels of deprivation, and clearly, as has been referred to, the Derry View catchment area is an area of significant deprivation in Monmouthshire. If you use our proxy of free school meal deprivation, it is our most deprived primary school, our most deprived school in Monmouthshire, and focusing on that and the benefits that we believe all through school will bring to those children was a key part of our consideration in 2017. The building condition of King Henry VIII was the worst and remains the worst in Monmouthshire. It was the poorest standard in 2017. There hasn't been continued investment in the school since that moment in time in this decision. So it continues to be in poor condition and is not suitable for 21st century learning. And another really important aspect, which is a consideration for all of these plans, is our commitment as a local authority to develop the Welsh language. It's a clear aspiration of the Welsh Government. It's clearly stated in our strategic documents, and our ability to release the space within Derry View for Ysgolhaefenni to move into and grow and develop, as we hope it will, is a fundamental part of this plan. So those were the key drivers in that sense. And more recently, in May 2019, the authority declared a climate emergency. That has had a direct and material impact on the provision of the new school and our consideration of how that build should be considered, the consequences on the Derry View changes, because there's a very clear commitment to net zero carbon in our provision as we go forward, and that's echoed in Welsh Government's arrangements too. So where are we now? Some of this I've touched on, so I won't go over it again. So 2017 we agreed it, I've talked about that. Welsh Government have also agreed it. We have recently submitted a revised strategic outline plan which dealt with some of the aspects that were in this consultation exercise, such as the removal of the Welsh medium stream at key stages 3 and 4, and the introduction of a special needs resource base for those children with complex neurodevelopmental needs. The points the penultimate bullet point on this slide clearly reflects, that there has been a period of time between 2017 and where we are now in 2021, but there have been a couple of significant endeavours in that period of time. We have built and completed another 2 secondary schools in Caldecott and Monmouth, both of which were more complex and difficult projects to deliver than we had anticipated, and they were challenging. And clearly, over the last 18 months, COVID-19 has had a significant impact on the resource and the availability of staff and the ability to actually consult and to go out and engage. So we are delayed, and we do need to progress this project now. We're also seeing the consequence of that delay in terms of construction inflation, the sparsity of some of the materials and so on. So there are challenges associated with that too. And I think on the final bullet point on this, I would just say that this is a complex project because it has many streams attached at the moment. There are probably 3 key elements of the project in play. So there is the consultation around the governance of the school. There is the work with Welsh Government regarding the SOP, and there is the ongoing work with our partners, both ACOM, who are our project managers, and Morgan Sindel, who are our appointed contractors, and the architects around the design and deliverability of that design. Chair, I can see in the chat that members raised their hands. I'm happy to take questions along the way, or I'm happy to wait till the end and take them then. I don't know how you want to do that.
I'll wait until the end, Chair. That's
fine. OK.
Yeah, don't let's interrupt it now. Let's take all questions at the end. Sorry, my mic was off.
No worries. Thanks. OK. So in terms of the questions and the option appraisal we went through, we considered doing nothing and maintaining the status quo. So I think just for clarity, this isn't about the project as a whole. This is about the governance in terms of the new school. So we could have done nothing and simply relocated or redeveloped King Henry on its site and moved Derryview School to that site. And left 2 independent community schools on the same site. The second option was to establish an all-through school with suitable ALN provision on the King Henry VIII site and cease to maintain King Henry VIII and Derryview schools. So that's the kind of, I guess, the language of the code which we work under. So that simply means that we provide a new school, so open a new school and close King Henry and Derryview. The third option was again to open that new school with ALN provision, but with a Welsh stream and close King Henry and Derryview. And the fourth, this was the alternative approach. We could have simply extended the age range of King Henry, if we take the consultation document, to the age of 4. So that King Henry, rather than being a school from 11 to 19, became a school from 4 to 19, or vice versa. We could have taken the age range of Derryview up and gone, rather than Derryview concluding at 11, it could have concluded at 19. So those were the governance options that we considered. Our preferred option was option 2, which was to re-provide on the site a new school and close both King Henry and Derryview. We felt that that was the fairest and most equitable approach. So there was none of the kind of that very clear sense of takeover which would have existed if we had extended age ranges. That picks up the second bullet point. In our extensive engagement with the Welsh Medium Education Forum, the provision of a Welsh medium stream was not seen as a positive development. Now, across Wales, schools, Welsh medium schools and English medium schools can often operate as bilingual institutions, and there are streams which are effective. However, I think the one factor that we had potentially not considered sufficiently was the fact that this is, Abergavenny is a highly anglicised area in terms of the English language. There isn't or the percentage of the population who speak Welsh as a first language is relatively low compared to the rest of Wales. And the fear from the Welsh Education Forum was that simply children would move from a highly immersive educational experience through the medium of Welsh in primary school into a model whereby their form of entry into secondary would be, I guess, and this is my language, not theirs at all, but swamped by an English medium provision that was around them. Because of the work that Torfaen have done in expanding the provision at Gwynclw, we know that we have a period of time where our pupils are able to continue to attend Gwynclw, but we're already in discussions with our colleagues across the Heads of the Valley, so as far as Merthyr and Blaenau Gwent and South Powys and ourselves, about what that future Welsh medium secondary provision could look like. So that was the route we determined was a way forward. The do nothing, having two independent schools on the same site, was not an option that we valued going forward. It simply didn't achieve some of the benefits that we believe an all-through school could. I think the next slide just really seeks to kind of give some clarity to the discussion, and I'm sure it will be a question that comes up, and this is regarding the provision of nursery education. So the first thing to say is that throughout all of the time of this project, we have never not considered, sorry, I'm going to do a double negative. So we have always planned to provide for nursery education on the new site. The question that we asked in our consultation exercise, which I think is an entirely fair question and an appropriate question to ask, was whether a non-maintained setting would add value to the provision on site. Now, clearly that did draw a very significant response in terms of many of the consultees who felt that a maintained setting, i.e. one which is run by a local authority school, was preferable. Now, I know I have colleagues on the call with me today who will be able to talk to this issue in more detail, but there are benefits associated with non-maintained settings. Their ability to offer wraparound childcare, longer hours, greater flexibility for working parents were all benefits that we felt were valued options that should be considered. Now, we've heard very clearly what the view is of some of the stakeholders who we've engaged, and that's one of the key areas that we will take forward in our considerations in preparation for early October. I won't dwell on the next set of slides. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to look at these, but in essence, the premise of the proposal now is that we close the two schools at the end of August 2023. The new school is open for a year. During that year, the schools will remain in their current premise, so they will remain in two separate buildings. On the 1st of September 2024, the two schools will come together in the new build, and at that point, although this is subject to a further consultation, Ysgol Elfenni will move from its current premises into what would be the former Derry Review School. In terms of the sizing, now there is a fairly extensive query around the sizing of the school in terms of some of the feedback we had, particularly with where we are in terms of at the cusp of starting a new process around a local development plan. I think the bottom line is we can only take account of what we know, and we can't take account of what might happen in the future that is as yet undetermined. So the schools have been sized appropriately for the houses that we know are already in the planning system for the Abergavenny area. And you'll see on this slide that we have allowed for 20 flying start places. So that's 20 in the morning, 20 in the afternoon. For 30 nursery pupils, so that's a provision of 60. So that leads directly into a two-form entry primary element. 420 primary pupils, so that two classes working their way through the primary phases, 1,200 pupils aged 11 to 16, and a 200 space sixth form. So it is a large school. It's not going to be a small endeavour, but they are appropriately sized for the future of Abergavenny and the area. Probably worth dwelling a little bit on, what is an all-through school. So an all-through school is a school which provides both primary and secondary education. It's led and managed by a single head teacher with a single governing body, and we fund that as a single school. So it's not a federation, which would retain separate budgets and so on, and have probably an executive head. It is a single school, a single governance entity. Primary and secondary age pupils belong to the same establishment, so they will have that commonality of experience. There's the opportunity to share resources and facilities across the school, but that doesn't mean that some of the clear kind of demarcation in terms of the provision for those very young children and those much older children isn't very clearly taken into account. And I think that was one of the things which featured in terms of some of the feedback, was concerns that the way that young children interacted with older children would be problematic in terms of safeguarding. Now, clearly we take safeguarding exceptionally seriously. It's our #1 priority in terms of what we do and how we operate, and the designers, the consultation will all have that written all the way through it. So there at no point will be that risk. But there are significant benefits in terms of those children experiencing that ethos and culture of a single school right from the very beginning. So just moving on, there is additional information here which I won't read through. It's a busy slide, so apologies for that, but hopefully you've obviously been able to read this. But you can see that there is a range of evidence now. Through schools are relatively new in terms of the state sector in the United Kingdom. There is a growing number of through schools in Wales, and certainly we've engaged with colleagues across Wales who run and have commissioned through schools, and certainly liaising with our colleagues in Ceredigion who have done it to great effect. And these are some of the key aspects that they draw out in terms of improving educational outcomes, including improving the educational provision and giving the opportunity for leadership and management to be enhanced within the school setting. I guess we come to the nub of it now, and this was the response, the written feedback that we had submitted to us. So we had 207 responses. You'll see there that the balance not in favour is the highest number at 117. Clearly, at one level, that is disappointing. Although, as I've mentioned throughout, I think there were some very specific aspects to this consultation, which, if disaggregated from the overall piece, would give us a much more balanced picture. So I think things like the nature of the nursery provision, be it maintained or non-maintained, and if we were to disaggregate concerns about things like traffic flow, there's been a social media discourse in Abergavenny about the school taking up and in essence not replacing sports facilities. That's clearly not going to happen. Anything which happens, we will there will be nothing but enhancement of community facilities through this development. So whilst on the face of it that looks like a challenging outcome, I think further analysis which will be presented to Cabinet will actually demonstrate that it's a more balanced picture. There were 14 key themes, and I hope that some of these give you a sense in terms of where we are, and obviously you'll have seen the full list of the comments and you'll see the different weights around these. But as I said, the first one is clearly around the concerns regarding the nursery. The second is the impact the proposal will have with pupils with additional learning needs. Although I have to say it was really positive at the public engagement sessions to hear parents of children with additional learning needs speaking very positively about what the new school will be able to offer. The logistics and the new school building I've referred to, that's the traffic management issues, the impact on leisure facilities I've talked to. Impact on staff was relatively low level, interestingly, in terms of the concerns there. So I think that's positive. And I think we've come at this clearly, bringing a primary and a secondary school together has a lesser impact if I was compared to if we were to be bringing two primary schools together, where there would be obviously duplication of a greater number of roles. The safeguarding concerns were almost exclusively around the safety of children on the school site. So I think hopefully I've touched on that in terms of making sure that design has safeguarding built in for that, and I think that's one of the things which perhaps there might be some questions on later. The impact on pupils, that was probably most specifically around the questions about how other schools would still transfer to the school at the point between Key Stage 2 and Key Stage 3. I can understand why that's a concern for some parents, but I'm reassured by the extent of the work that the cluster in Abergavenny are doing collectively together. It's a model that works elsewhere, it works regionally, and there are other examples across Wales. I will be talking to both school leaders and education directors about the success of that model and reflecting on that again for Cabinet. The structure and the governance were questions really about how governing bodies would be established and the opportunities and how they would be brought together. And then the final ones, the views in relation to the proposal were in essence why we'd come to the position. And as I've said, and as hopefully has become clear in this presentation, that this proposal was actually set in 2017. The name of the school was a significant concern for King Henry. Obviously King Henry is a school that was founded, I think, by Royal Charter, has had that name for a significant period of time, hundreds of years, and it has a very significant place in the community in Abergavenny and links to some funding as well. So they were very concerned about that, and that's one of the things which we've had to look at and take a view of. In terms of the consultation process, as I said, we extended the consultation process. We gave face-to-face opportunities for community. We gave face-to-face opportunities for schools. We also did virtual meetings for schools, as well as the normal mailbox response opportunities. So I think that there has been a lot of opportunity for people to engage in this discussion. The impact on post-16 provision, our hope very much is that the renewal of the school will encourage more students to attend post-16 education in Abergavenny. Any of you from the area, if you happen to be at the train station early in the morning, will see significant numbers of young people getting on the train to go to Hereford Sixth Form College. That's something that we want to counteract directly. Impact on Welsh medium provision. If this proceeds and goes ahead, this will only have a positive impact on Welsh medium provision, because it will give us that opportunity to give Ysgolefenni that opportunity in a new building to develop and enhance their provision right up to being a two-form entry primary school. And finally, there was some feedback around the financial impact. I've talked a little bit around the pressures around construction inflation. That's clearly a concern. The project is funded by both the local authority and, of course, by Welsh Government. The pressures that we're experiencing around construction inflation are being experienced by colleagues right across Wales. So there's probably something for us all to consider how we go forward and how we understand that. There, and obviously, I'm keeping my colleagues in SLT and in particular our finance director, Peter Davis, very well briefed in terms of where we are, where the costs are, how they're escalating, and we are being very clear about the impact that potentially has in terms of future revenue budgets if we have to fund it through borrowing. So again, a very busy slide here in terms of the views of the schools. So I won't read through these. You can see that Derry View, they were positive in some areas. They were concerned about the nature of the provision of the non-maintained nursery setting. I suspect that would be something which we had expected. And they go through with a various set of concerns, which I think they articulated very fairly, and I'm grateful for the way in which their chair of governors and their head teacher have engaged us throughout the process. King Henry, again, positive in terms of the step forward and the opportunity that it provides for the community to have these outstanding facilities. Two specific concerns, the very strong view about the name, which I've touched on earlier, and I think in alignment with their colleagues in Derryview, this concern around the non-maintained nursery. So it brings us on then to the view of Eston. This is one of the specific pieces in the code that we have to respond to. I think just a couple of things just to highlight. Eston's opinion that the proposal is likely to maintain at least the present standards of education. That's a good place to start. We've given a very clear rationale for the proposal. We give valid advantages and disadvantages on the all-through model. So hopefully you can see on this slide that they are positive in terms of the way that the consultation report has been set out. It continues on the second slide, and there are a couple of things that on this one which I would draw your attention to in the interest of balance and fairness. So the top bullet point, how do we transfer pupils into the specialist provision from other settings? And they just raise the issue that we haven't explored that sufficiently, so we'll address that and provide a detailed response for Cabinet. And the midway down, the local authority does not consider the impact on standards, teaching, curriculum, wellbeing and leadership in sufficient detail. So we'll pick up those individual aspects again in more detail. They pick up in that line that the understanding of the benefits of an all-through school do touch on all of those things, but I think they're just looking for us to be slightly more explicit. So when we respond to Eston and pick that up in the Cabinet report, we'll make sure that we cover all of those aspects off. So in terms of just drawing this to my input to a conclusion, 4 key themes for me, and these are not in any particular order. The name of the new school and the historic links to King Henry VIII clearly came out as a significant issue from the secondary school. The nature of the nursery provision, maintained or non-maintained, that clearly was an issue. The strategic rationale behind an all-through school, and I think we're getting clearer pictures around the benefits associated with all-through schools all the time, and I think our engagement with other authorities continues to do that. And the final point, this issue around how do we transition other schools in. I'm pleased to say that we haven't heard, just on that final point, in terms of engagement with the other schools locally. They continue to work very well as a cluster, and none of the cluster have spoken directly to us or submitted responses to us that set out any concerns in terms of the ongoing transition between their school and the new school in Abergavenny. So in terms of the next steps, we've got a range of options and different things we can do going forward. So we can, if we so wish, recommend to Cabinet that we proceed with exactly the proposal that we have set out in the consultation document. We could proceed with the proposal with what we'd refer to as appropriate modifications, so make some changes to it in light of the feedback that we've received from the community and the 2 schools. Or the final 2, we could abandon the proposal and just walk away and step away from this and leave the 2 schools in situ untouched, or we could significantly recast the proposal and go back out to consultation. It's currently our intention that we go to Cabinet on the 6th of October. It's really important that we hear from you as elected members and members of this committee today, and that will further help us determine which recommendation we take forward. And that report will be ready and prepared for distribution ahead of the 6th of October. And we will make our consultation report, which is the large report that we have to complete, available to everybody who responded to the consultation. So that concludes the presentation of the report. Obviously, Chair, I'll be happy to take questions on what I've said already this morning, or anything which is in the documents that have been shared alongside.
Okay, thank you. Well, that was very comprehensive. go to questions now then, and got a hand up, well, a few hands up actually, but the first hand up is Councillor Christopher Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. Just an observation, first of all, though, regarding the public open forum. I'm slightly puzzled as to why a Labour town councillor would write in a personal capacity in such a negative way, and then try to get a bit of credibility behind it by saying that they're a town councillor and the school governor. I'm assuming they haven't authority to do that from the town council or the Labour group or the school governing body. But like I said, it's just an observation. I didn't expect an answer, as the person isn't here anyway. Thank you for your report and presentation, Will, very much appreciated. And also thank you as well for being so adaptable in the feedback process, given the difficulties that were faced. My question to you is that looking at this consultation document as a whole and the low level of feedback from the community as a whole, I mean, you could assume, although you did sort of mention that the negativity of 125 not being in favour, you could assume that the overwhelming majority of the community are in favour. So my question to you is in two parts, really. In terms of the numbers of the feedback in this, is that pretty standard in comparison to sort of other consultations on schools and similar projects? And the second one is, will a further consultation be required given the low level of feedback from Abergavenny residents? Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Yeah, so in terms of the numbers, I think, interestingly, I can cite one specific example elsewhere whereby we were undertaking a review of a catchment area, which I think the vast majority of people in that catchment area were positive about the change, but didn't express that view. We ended up with the kind of the more vocal opposition, and we had to postpone and redo that exercise. When we redid that exercise in the last couple of years, one of the really clear bits of feedback was, well, we thought this was going to happen, and so we didn't engage with it. So we understood this was going to take place, so we didn't see that need. I think, as I mentioned, I think one or two of the approaches that we set out in the consultation paper, I think, have really exercised some people. So I think the non-maintained, maintained issue really kind of brought out a significant voice and concern from a number of people. So I think that has had an impact. So I would say broadly similar, I think, in terms of the feedback numbers. I suspect that for some people, they simply felt that actually, you know, the council's going to build a new school. That's a good thing. We don't need to say anything about this. And I guess to a certain extent, the nature of the nature of the kind of proposal being a significant investment, people seeing that as a good thing, maybe they wouldn't take that opportunity. But it's a difficult one to square away, really, in terms of, you know, it would be really positive. You know, certainly when we were, I think we did, I can't remember the exact number, but certainly kind of into double digits, the kind of the events and so on. It was positive when we did the public events that actually members of the public were saying, I think this is a great thing. You know, the last, I think, event, we had someone who had worked in through schools talking around the benefits of the through school model. We obviously had parents talking about the benefits of the ALN provision, and I think that's really reassuring. And I think when you hear that, it gives reassurance to people who are in the audience as well. So I think that was good when we certainly did hear those things. With regards to future consultation, my sense at the moment is that we don't need to go back out for more consultation, but that's a very short part of the answer, because whilst we don't, I don't feel we need to go back out again for consultation regarding the governance, because I think that there is a path through this which will resolve many of the issues that people have raised. There will be a huge amount of consultation with regards to what the school looks like, how it feels, how it operates, how it works in its place, how the community are engaged with it, how other partners are engaged with it. So this isn't for the governance piece, this is an opportunity around consultation. For the future of the school, there will be nothing but more consultation. And I'm really pleased that a couple of my colleagues who work on the project team with regards to the 21st century schools are in this meeting this morning, this virtual meeting with us. But I would for Kath Saunders, many of you will know as a long-standing member of the team, but Tim Bird has joined us directly from Monmouth Comprehensive School. Tim was their deputy head teacher for a long time, but was responsible for the delivery from the school side of the really successful project we had in Monmouth. So I'm really grateful that Tim has joined our team now, and he'll be able to bring all of that experience of that collaboration, that consultation and that engagement into the work that we do with the schools, with the communities in Abergavenny in the future. So at the moment, my view would be that further consultation is not required.
Okay, thanks. Well, we go now to Councillor Maureen Powell.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you very much, Will, for your presentation. It was very clear and brought it up to, summed up very, very well indeed. I'm not actually asking a question so much as making a statement. I know I am a governor at King Henry, so I do have a personal but non-prejudicial interest. I feel that we've gone on for a very long time getting to this spot, and we really do need to move on, because we have to remember that we're not the only school that needs replacing. We have Chepstow who are waiting desperately to have a new school, and if we all get held up here, they will be held up as well. We are a whole county, and we have to look after the pupils all over our county. I know there are some instances with the reading difficulties, and I'm sure that the nursery provision and that sort of thing can be sorted out, but I do feel that we mustn't hold back from making a start. We desperately need this new school. And when you say that how many was it that had gone against it? 200, or was it enough? In the hundreds. When you think about the number of people in Abergavenny, in my ward alone, I have 1,600 voting adults in just my ward. And that's only that. So you imagine how many thousand people there are throughout Abergavenny. Well, if you went to them individually and said, are you in favour of the school or are you against it? I think you'd find it would be overwhelming for the school. The people I've spoken to when I'm walking about town and when I'm walking about my ward are all very keen for this to go ahead. I know there's going to be incidents where you have to alter certain things, and nothing's a completely smooth road, but I feel that it would be very adverse if we were to go back to consultation and waste any more time. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Powell. Councillor Tony Easton.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm County Councillor Tony Easton, Dewsbury Ward, Caldecott, standing in for Martin Groker. Before I start, I sit on the select committee apolitically. I don't know Mary Ann Brocklesby. I haven't got a clue who she is, but to mention the fact she's an Abergavenny Labour councillor, I think was wrong in this capacity this morning. I don't know her, I don't know her politics, and I don't bring my politics directly to select committees. So back onto the points of Will's report. Good report, Will, and I hope the school in Abergavenny develops as the one in Caldecott has done. My concerns to start with are about Flying Start. Well, Flying Start will be there with 20 youngsters. They develop in an area, I'm sorry, I got a croaky throat. They develop in an area which is deprived. And I got Flying Start in my ward in Caldecott, which is equally as deprived as parts of Derryview. Not as many free school meals. I think it's 35% of the last count as opposed to 50 something. How those children develop in Flying Start is great. What concerns me is if the route is to go to a non-maintained nursery provision at year 3, those youngsters will have nowhere to go, because year 3 will become elitist for those people who can afford to pay for that education, development of education. So I'm concerned that we will lose our Flying Start youngsters and depriving them of further on education further on. And I think that Joanne might want more to say about it, so I won't say much more about Flying Start and further development. Welsh medium education, little concern the comments you made, well, not concerned, I think it's positive. You're making concerns that we don't want to lose Welsh medium education. We want to keep it as a specific body as Welsh and to develop on. At the moment, we've got children going from primary education to Winthlew and in the south of the county to the school in Dyffryn. To develop, you then mentioned that in the future you might need to look at Blaenau Gwent, Torfaen and maybe Powys. I'd like to see more ability for the Welsh medium education youngsters to have the ability to continue their Welsh medium education after GCSE, because I do believe that after GCSE there's no provision for transport to these schools, and if we're going to have to take children out of the area, I think we should be looking at a better policy of getting them there. But maybe that's the future. It's not something dependent on where we are looking at the 8th. I note the comments on Estins. I won't comment on them again. I noticed they were there. Governing bodies is a little question mark I got over. It's going to be an overall governing body for 3 strands of education. Is this a good move, or would it be creating a distance model of how the school operates? Is it good to have one overall governing body? That's my real concerns, and that's what I picked up from the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks.
Well, okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Eason, for those views and comments. Yeah, Flying Start does a tremendous job, and I think the way that they work across both, with their colleagues in the health service and so on.
You have to shut the door. It's raining like hell. You know what I mean?
Okay, has been really positive, and that's clearly the fact. So in terms of the plans, there's a plan to relocate some Flying Start provision and include that provision within the new school setting, which I think will be beneficial, but also to retain the Acorn Centre on the Derry View site as well for Flying Start provision as well. So we're actually looking to expand and develop that opportunity for parental engagement, for support for those children and young people across the piece. So I couldn't agree more about the importance of that, and I think we've seen that quite clearly. We're looking to kind of create that sense around, family and children's centres, which will help them, those early years of childhood. We know how important the first 1,000 days are, but equally how that links through into the schooling life, which they'll experience, and they'll be in school for a long time. With regards to Welsh medium education, yeah, absolutely. And I know your work and your support for Ysgol y Ffin in the south of the county. I actually agree. I think my aspiration at the time, I thought that the Welsh medium stream would be a really positive development, because it would give an in-county solution for Welsh medium education post the end of primary school. But I think the discussions we've had with our colleagues in the forum, who are huge advocates for Welsh medium education, have been very clear about the potential of that impacting on the experience that those children have. The conversations that are planned in for colleagues with, it will be Blaenau Gwent, potentially Merthyr, and Blaenau Gwent, Merthyr and South Powys, I think have the potential to create a viable opportunity in the future. Clearly, at the moment, if Ysgol y Ffin moves to being, hopefully a 2-form entry school in the near future, with y Ffin, with the work we're currently doing in y Ffin, will be a single form entry. That's an expansion up to 210, hopefully additional capacity added in the northeast of the county. But even those numbers wouldn't give us sufficient quantum to have our own secondary provision in Monmouthshire at the moment. So I think collaboration will be the way forward in that area for a little bit. But your point around transport is a point very well made, and one which we need to be cognizant of. With regard to the governing body, I think with all governing bodies, I guess the same could be said for a governing body of a very large secondary school, in terms of its proximity and do they understand the needs of all of their learners. Clearly, as we go through that process of drawing the transitionary governing body, the temporary governing body, and then finally the new governing body into place, we'll be looking very carefully at the skills and experiences that we need on that governing body to make sure that the new school, if that's the direction that we take, is a success. So I think our governors right across the county, I think, are taking huge advantage of much of the professional learning, the development opportunities that are offered through the EAS. And I think are doing a really good job as advocates for the children in their schools. And I think that's something that we'll certainly look to build on in the future. So thanks for your questions, Tony.
Okay, thank you, Will. I just want to make a point here before we carry on with the questions, and Councillor Reeson raised it. I do take issue with Councillor Edwards making remarks about the person who wrote in. This is a democratic process. We're not in a political scenario here as in a full council meeting, and it's not for any member to actually then make a comment about that person who's written in. So, you know, I will not accept comments like that in the future. But we carry on now then. We go to Councillor Watkins. I will come to you, Maggie Harris. I have noted you want to come in.
Hello, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the report, Will. It was very comprehensive. I was expecting other people to have already started off the nursery question, but it looks like it's going to be me. Lucky you. But I've also got a question around the ALM provision as well, unsurprisingly. So we'll start off with nursery first. There are benefits to having private provision of nursery in terms of the wraparound care. I can fully understand that, but there are also then risks attached to using the private sector. The risks are it is a business, it has to make money, and I have spoken to any number of nursery providers of recent years, and they have told me that they find it almost impossible to manage on just the amount of money that comes from Welsh Government for those nursery places. And that is the reason why most private provision, even if you're just having the allocated state paid for hours, incurs top-up fees. Top-up fees can be incredibly difficult for families on low incomes to manage to pay. In fact, it sometimes means that they don't take up those places, or they take up less hours of those places than they are entitled to, which is at detriment to the children. So I have significant concerns about how that would happen. What measures will we as a council put in place to make sure that will not happen? We're also talking about a private business, and private businesses can go out of business. What measures are we as a council going to put in place to make sure that the nursery provision actually does stay on site? I know we've been trying to get a nursery into a school in the south of the county, again using private provision, and no provider has been found that's available to do that or who is willing to take those risks attached at the moment. So how are we going to definitely get a nursery in on the site? So I have got some substantial concerns about the very private nature. When something is run by a local authority, we know it will happen. We know it will definitely occur. There will be no additional charges. This means the most vulnerable section of our children will definitely get that desperately needed early years education. So what are we going to do as an authority to make sure it works if we're going to go through the non-maintained route? Because I'm not currently convinced we should be. So that's the nursery from my point of view. In terms of ALN, then, are we talking about having a primary and a secondary SRB within the new school site? Are they going to be fully functional SRBs, as in we have got in Caldecott's a secondary SRB? And is this just an acknowledgement that actually ALN needs are increasing across the county, so that we're going to be having a whole new extra secondary SRB in King Henry? Because, well, what was King Henry? Because I believe King Henry doesn't currently have an SRB. So is that just that we got acknowledging the increasing numbers, or is there actually going to be a knock-on effect on Monmouth or Caldecott in terms of reducing the capacities there? So could you give a bit more explanation about what was actually going to be happening with SRB for that? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Morning, Councillor Watkins. Thank you for your questions, and I'll pick them up in the order in which you gave those. So the first thing I'd say is certainly when we were approaching this, and I think in the process, I was I think disappointed, and that's a very strong word, and I probably don't mean disappointed, around the use of the word private, because we were quite clear that it was a non-maintained, and there are different models for non-maintained provision. And so, you know, locally in Abergavenny, there are a number of nursery settings that are run by committee, by different governance models, which aren't profit driven. And I think it's important to note that a non-maintained setting can be delivered in a number of different ways. Every child is eligible for 10 hours of nursery education every week. That's free. That doesn't come with the top-up fees included in that or eligible in that. And beyond that, there's the 30-hour childcare allowance that the Welsh Government is funding right across. And obviously, you know, in some of those more deprived places, eligibility for that 30 hours will be very significant. So there were opportunities, we felt, and there is additional funding that we can draw on to support extra hours to get to a position whereby a child could have 30 hours in that setting. So we were trying to find that balance of that opportunity of both enabling people to access nursery education, which is critical, but also enabling people, if they wanted to go back to work and those type of things, actually that potential to do that. So we were trying to find that balance. It was a question that we asked because it is a direction of travel that we've seen Welsh Government indicate it wants to see nursery education a greater mixed economy. The provision of nursery education in Monmouthshire is a very mixed economy. In fact, in terms of providers, there are more non-maintained providers in Monmouthshire than there are maintained. Although the number attending is roughly 50-50, there are more settings who are non-maintained. They also have some other advantages in terms of they're able to offer that for 48 weeks of the year through the 30-hour childcare offer, as opposed to only term time in a maintained setting. So whilst there are concerns, and I completely recognise those in terms of accessibility, there are benefits associated with it as well. And it was trying to ask that question and for us to work through in this opportunity, in terms of the new school, what would be the most appropriate provision. Now, clearly listening to the feedback, and you know, the way that you've expressed it this morning is very similar to the way that many others in the process I've listened and engaged with, and my colleague Sharon, my colleague Sue Hall have engaged with colleagues on that in terms of our early year teams. It's been, you know, an interesting debate and discussion, and I think we're just going to have to take this point of weighing up where we think the benefit actually falls in the greatest way. But I think your points are very well made in terms of us wanting to make sure that those who need the greatest level of support receive the greatest level of support is the fundamental point we're working from. So, you know, going all the way back to the second slide in the presentation, we want to give our children and people the very best start in life. And we need to find the best mechanism to do that. If I can move on to the ALN piece. So we are seeing a growth in the number of children who require support for additional learning needs across the county. I think Jackie's on the call, but I'll hopefully be able to do this answer justice without having Jackie to come in. Our single biggest area of demand is children with neurodevelopmental needs. So if we were, I think we're at 36% of our statement of children have a neurodevelopmental need, be that autism, ADHD, something in that area. So we wanted in this provision to provide specialist provision for those children. Clearly the provisions that exist in Caldicot, in Monmouth, in Derryview, in Overmonnow and Pembroke provide for a range of different needs. But seeing the evidence as it's coming to us at the moment, seeing the work that's been done around what future demand is likely to be, complex neurodevelopmental needs was the absolute area for us to focus on. There will be, if the consultation process works its way through, there will be one SNRB because there will be one school. And interestingly, that's the model that if we look to the independent settings where some children have to be placed currently, the through school model is a model we see very often in independent specialist provisions for children. In terms of those children, the design process it's working through, and as I mentioned, Kath and Tim will be working with colleagues in the ALN team, the leaders of our current settings in Monmouth and Caldecott. I'll go through them all again: Pembroke, Overmonnow and Derry View, working with those leaders to understand what works best. But clearly, fundamentally, the important thing will be is that those children are in environments which best support their learning at their age. I very much hope, and I always hope, that in terms of our additional learning needs provision, there are opportunities for children to engage in the wider life of the school. So I don't like very much kind of separated buildings or units or things like that. But we have to recognise that children will need some specialist resources, they will need specialist space and opportunities for specialist care. And those are all being designed in and considered as part of the design process. So there is growing need. We're keen to have more children close to their community. We're keen to have more children in Monmouthshire, and that's what's driven that decision.
Okay, thanks. We'll go now then to Councillor Louise Brown.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you very much for the presentation. I did actually read the consultation document, and it did mention about the non-maintained nursery provision within that. But unfortunately, within the consultation document itself, it didn't actually go into the pros and cons of the different type of provision, either through maintained or non-maintained. And I assume that in relation to the 60 places mentioned, that's sort of 30 in the morning and 30 in the afternoon, so there wouldn't be any overlap for anybody to be able to obtain the full 30 hours that they would be of free childcare that they may be entitled to. I come at it from a slightly different perspective to Councillor Watkins, because I think the opportunity to have the up to 30 hours care is actually important. And going back to a time when I had younger children at home, I ended up I had a nanny, and then I ended up using I was working full time, I had a nanny, and then basically that provision went. So I ended up using a shopper's nursery, which was only for 2 or 3 hours a day. And what happened was that I then worked at home, but I did find that it just didn't work. And so I ended up having to give up work because of the lack of, childcare provision. And, I was trained professionally as well. With regard to the suggestion from the King Henry governors, they suggest that, that there ought to be sort of a further consultation just dealing with the pros and cons of the different type of nursery provisions. And I think that would actually be quite helpful, because I do think that the responses that you've got have been clouded by this particular issue, and I think it will be sensible to tease that out. With regard to top-up fees, I believe that there's a limit of £7.50 a day, and I think that goes towards the meals. I mean, I might be wrong, it's just what I've read. So I think it will be helpful if that particular, I'm not saying that a full-blown consultation, but I'm saying to determine whether or not the results that you've got have been clouded by this particular issue, and so that parents realise that that they're on a maintained setting basis. It's only possible to obtain the 2 hours a day, as opposed to the up to 10 hours a week, as opposed to the up to 30 hours that they could obtain in a non-maintained setting. So I just think that this issue hasn't been explored properly enough, and I don't know, I mean, obviously the consultation response itself didn't the document didn't go into those details. I mean, it might have been raised, you know, in actual meetings that you had, but I do think that it's a sensible suggestion from the governors of King Henry, which was in your slide about the pros and cons of each issue. I don't think it would drag it out particularly long, just to go into that, you know, would they be positive or negative depending upon which type of provision, but fully explaining to people to give them the full information of what the pros and cons of the different things are, so that when they answer a consultation response, they fully know how they're answering it. And I just think that would be the fairest way forward. But obviously, other people may have different views on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. I think that many of those points are very fair. In terms of the discussion, so at the meetings, in all of the meetings, it featured heavily. Some of it, I guess there were different levels of concern. There was, I think, at some point, a kind of an immediate concern that there was going to be a private provider, and quite a kind of an immediate response. That was one part. There was a second element was around the nature of control of the setting and the provision, and the fact that there was a sense that the children would be better served if they were under the control, and that's not a word I know either head teacher would want to hear me use, of the school from age 3 all the way through. But you know, I know colleagues and we have schools where there are non-maintained settings on the school site, and they work really well, and there's a good level of integration between the non-maintained setting and the school. So that was the second level, and then the third level is the level which you know, I think has been alluded to by Councillor Watkins this morning, around accessibility, fairness of access, and equity of opportunity. So those are the kind of the three levels. I think that it's a good prompt for us to think about what a future engagement might look like. I'll talk to colleagues about the integrity of the process and what we would or wouldn't be able to do. I think certainly in the cabinet paper, I was always minded to expand the views and have a distinct kind of element to that paper, which considered both the pros and the cons of the nursery being maintained or non-maintained. But I think your contribution really draws out the benefits of having the opportunity for childcare on site, and the opportunity that wraparound childcare presents. And you know, as you know, when we had little children, they're not very little anymore, but you know, I remember that some of the pressures in terms of trying to kind of get to places to pick them up at the right times and so on, and that wraparound is important. So we'll look to find a way forward through this, but I do take your point, and we will reflect on what we're able to do within the confines of the code as we progress. And so thanks for the question.
Okay, thank you, Will. We now move to Councillor Maggie Harris for her question or comment.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. And thank you, Will, for the report. You and I have communicated on this subject more times than I think probably we've had hot dinners. But never mind. And thank you, Joanne, for your precursor on the nursery. You have taken the words out of my mouth, so thank you for all your contribution on that. I would like to take time, Chair, just to actually recap what Derry View School actually is, where it is, and why we have made the decision on my personal capacity and as governors in our great concern about having a non-maintained nursery on site. We are already in our school 40%, 47% preschool meals and rising. That's the highest in Wales, in Monmouthshire. We've got 40 funded ALM. This is as of July this year. 40 funded ALN and 20 non-funded ALN types that access our school action plan. That's 25% of children in that kind of group. We also have about 13% children who have English as a second language. So already we are, I know every school likes to say claim they're special, but we have very specific situations because we sit in the middle of a very deprived area. It was a community first area and it hasn't progressed an awful lot beyond that stage. So when we, as governors and as a personal capacity, we read that the maintained section of the nursery was likely to be stripped out and put under a non-maintained control, frankly, we were appalled. There isn't another way to describe it. And although, Will, I know you don't like the idea that we will go on and on about private provider, but private, as Joanne has said, is private. It isn't maintained. And it brings with it a lack of control, which is another word you don't like using, because as a private provider, it is not under the constraints of the head teacher, the senior leadership team, or the governors. It may interact. It may be, as you phrased it, communication between the school and non-maintained setting should be robust, but that is not ensured. What we have at Nursery at the moment is an integrated, totally professional system, staffed by an Elenco lead who is a qualified teacher with all our TAs specialising in nursery provision, who have chosen to devote their work to very needy children. And for them to transfer all that work at year, when they're 3 years old, to a non-maintained section, and then have to transition them back into the reception when they're 4, seems to me totally, utterly illogical. What they are provided for at Berryview is already 10 hours a week. They have that for free. Nothing is free in this world. Someone is paying for it. It just means that the parents aren't. In a maintained setting, it is payment. As Joanna explained, and I know from my own grandchildren, nursery provision, wraparound care is an immensely expensive process. And for the parents in this deprived ward that Lansdowne is, these parents cannot afford it. And the thought that we may lose all the hard work that the school has put in ensuring that these children have access to the best care, the best provision, and the best transition does alarm me quite considerably. And so I will write a separate submission, but I beg you to please consider this very, very carefully, which I'm sure that you will. I think I will stop it there because otherwise I shall go on very passionately about the whole thing. But no mention has been made of the fact that the parents at the review did actually gather together and they have actually presented a petition. A petition has gone, actually refusing the fact that they would prefer to have a maintained nursery and not a private one. Nowhere has this been mentioned. The petition was set up by the parents. It was supported by governors and some local town councillors because we were asked to join in and we did so willingly. But on the names that I was obtaining, I only have one refusal. The reports from other people who were doing the petition, they also said that they had very, very few people saying, no, they didn't want to sign. There is a great fundamental feeling here that to move to a non-maintained setting is detrimental to the requirements of the school and the needs of the children as they come through. And so from that point of view, I rest my case. Please consider. Thank you very much.
Morning, Maggie, and thank you. You know, I think on your last point around the petition, and I haven't had sight of the petition. I understand it was presented to the last full council meeting, I think. I mean, if I was, I don't know how the petition was phrased, but I suspect, you know, that the balance of this, and going back to Councillor Brown's point, the balance of this might actually be that rather than the, you know, if I ask the question, rather than the 2.5 hours a day that your child is currently receiving, would you like 6 hours of free childcare a week, including nursery education in a regulated setting that's inspected by ESTIN, that has staff who have to be qualified in child development and develops and delivers the curriculum for Wales? I don't know what that answer would be. And I think this comes to, when we look at it, we know that Welsh Government want to see greater flexibility in our nursery provision. There is clearly a piece which sits across this, which there are differing views on. And I think we need to take this time to step away and to understand the benefits on both sides, because there clearly are benefits on both sides. Hopefully, just some of those things I referred to then will give members of the committee some confidence as well around our non-maintained settings, because I am very conscious that when we have a discussion like this about this setting, that 50% of our children who are in nursery are in non-maintained settings. And it would be a terrible thing if a parent who listens into this was thinking, oh, is my child not receiving the right curriculum? Are they not subject to inspection? Are their staff not necessarily trained? And they are all of those things. So there are different means of providing the service. And I understand the concerns that you have, Maggie. I understand the concerns that Councillor Watkins raised as well. But there is probably a greater balance in terms of the decision we need to make in the coming weeks now and present to Cabinet. So I think the nursery piece that I think we've eloquently seen this morning and evidently seen this morning is the part which is the real tension around this proposal. I'm grateful, you know, of course, to Maggie and the work that she does in that community and supporting Derry View over the time that she has done. And we'll take those views and we'll bring them back in and we'll reflect on those and determine what we think is the best way forward.
Okay, thank you, Will. Can I make a point? And sorry to be laying the law down today, but there are bits coming up in the conversation bar which are not essential and which the public can't access. I really would instruct members now not to do that, because it isn't fair on the public who are looking in. And everything in this committee, as in every other scrutiny committee, needs to come through the chair. Councillor Louise Brown, if you've got a fairly brief point,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think the difference is that in the maintained setting, it's 10 hours a week or 2 hours a day, and I think in the non-maintained area it can be up to 30 hours a week, which is basically 6 hours a day. And I think I just wanted to, I think inadvertently Will said 6 hours a week rather than 6 hours a day. So I just wanted to correct that for the purpose of the people who are listening. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions or comments now before? Okay, well.
Yes, Chair, can I did have my hand up.
Sorry, it hasn't come through, David. Sorry.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, no problem. Sorry. I just like to thank Will for the presentation this morning, and there are clearly issues to be resolved, but confident that Will and his team will get those resolved to hopefully everybody's satisfaction. I may well be stating the obvious in the sense that King Henry the school pupils and staff deserve better surroundings than they have now, and so also will Derry View benefit from the proposed new school. I've declared my interest as being a governor at Ysgol Gymraeg y Fenni, and I'd just like to point out to the meeting that the school Ysgol Gymraeg y Fenni is bursting at its seams. There's probably a new building that seems to be required every year to accommodate new pupils that are attending the school. In providing new buildings, and we thank the council and the county for that, there is less and less play area, and the timescale that we've been given this morning is that we're 3 years away from moving into what will be what is currently Derry View School and will become, if plans go ahead, the new location of Ysgol Gymraeg Efenni. Is there any way in which the situation at Ysgol Gymraeg Efenni can be alleviated, and hopefully in the context of this development, can it be pushed ahead so it happens even quicker, is my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones.
Thanks, Councillor Jones. Yeah, you know, we are aware of the pressures in Ysgol Efenni. Members might be with us. So currently there are 252 children at Ysgol Efenni. The capacity of the school with the new provision that was introduced last year is 317, and that excludes their nursery provision. So there is headroom there at the moment. We are aware of the fact that there are, people are making that choice, which is great, and really pleased to see the growth of Welsh medium in the north of the county. In terms of accelerating it, I don't think there are any ways around that. I think the key hope and the key driver is that we can hit the deadlines that the project has set itself. We've given ourselves a challenging deadline in terms of the construction, in terms of making sure that we can transition the schools in an appropriate way, whereby the schools are ready for that transition. So I don't think I've got a magic answer this morning, but we'll do all we can to continue to support all of our schools and make sure that they have the capacity and the space to give our children the education that we want. Okay, thank you, Will.
Thank you, Will.
And Councillor Eason, do you want to come in briefly?
Yes, just briefly, and just to discuss the topic that Councillor Jones has raised about the capacity at Ysgol Gymraeg Efenni as opposed to the capacity. Well, first of all, I'm a governor at Ysgol Efenni, and I'll declare a personal interest in that. And the capacity at Ysgol Efenni, which we need to find more children to come to. So would it be more innovative to look at the catchment area of both these schools so that they both could be used, as I say, in tandem to ensure that the education is available for pupils? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Eason. Well,
yeah, I mean, we'd be happy to do whatever. I mean, I think the work that's been done down in Efenni is tremendous. I think in expanding up to 210, it will give it the opportunity for wraparound childcare through its mitrin as well, which I think is really positive. And I really want to see Efenni thriving as a full school. That's an absolute ambition of ours, and we'll do all we can do to support Catherine and the team there. If it's something, and I'll pick this up with Matt Jones, my colleague, later, if there is something that we can do in terms of looking at catchments, then we will do that. In terms of, we're hoping to look to the northeast of the county as well in terms of additional provision there for Welsh medium. So we'll have to look at the catchment areas for all of our Welsh medium schools. So if there's anything we can do, Councillor Eason, we'll be certainly going to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Take it now. I can't see any further hands up. First and foremost, Will, obviously thank you very much for taking the time to go through the presentation and to explain the rationale and to really look at it in some detail. I know some of us have heard it before, but I think the more one hears of the information, the more it goes in, and it is such a big development. In terms of summing up, I'm not going to go back over all of the questions. Members will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think generally the scrutiny committee is in favour of the development. King Henry building is in a poor state. It's been in a poor state for some time, and in terms of the current teaching and learning and pedagogy, it just isn't really fit for purpose in that sense. And that school serves a very large area. It's still a very large comprehensive school, even though it went down from in the 80s when it was about 1800 comprehensive, but it is a significant provider. And I agree with Will when you said earlier on, if you look at the train station in the morning, the number of children who are training up to Hereford and to other institutions, and not that I want to stop those pupils going, but first and foremost, I think people who live in Monmouthshire should be able to send their children right through the process in Monmouthshire, if possible. And I think that's quite important. So, as I say, there are concerns about Derryview moving, and we all appreciate. And I've lived in Abergavenny 38 years. I've taught in the area. I know the area well. It is probably one of the most challenging areas in the town, and probably in the authority, in terms of levels of deprivation, free school meal provision, and so on. So I honestly think a huge amount of care needs to be taken in the transfer of that school, and it is quite a big transfer. When a school moves, people might write it down, but if you've been in a school where it does physically move, then that is quite traumatic, both for staff, but particularly for pupils, and also for parents. So that certainly needs to be well handled. But as I say, as far as I can garner this morning, there hasn't been any huge opposition to it. The major sticking point is obviously the opposition to the non-maintained setting at the age of 3. And that has come out. And I've been in meetings, and I've obviously looked at the dreaded social media, but other areas. I live in the area. I talk to people. I'm on the town council. I'm on the county council. I know a large number of parents and children there. But I think that is the major sticking point, as far as I can tell this morning, and that's been eloquently put by Councillor Maggie Harris and others. And that the fact that it is in such an area of high deprivation from well-resourced families, childcare, and if you're in a well-paid professional job, yes, it's costly, but it's affordable. But if you're in a low-income family, then obviously that is more of an issue. So from what I can see this morning, that is the sticking point. Personally, and I declare an interest as being a governor of Ysgol Gymraeg of Fenny, but just personally, I would not recommend, as has been suggested, going back out to consultation. That will delay the process again. I think now that we're moving towards making a decision as an authority, then any hold up, I don't honestly think will be of benefit. But as I say, I reiterate, I think the issue of nursery non-maintained provision is a sticking point. And I think if that can be looked at, then I don't feel there's any opposition within this group. And we've got a wide spectrum of people, councillors here from across the authority, and other people. I don't see any opposition otherwise. I think it is positive. The feedback this morning has been positive, other than that issue. So that's what I would say. I don't know if you want to come back on that, Will, or not.
No, that's really helpful, and thank you for your summing up, Chair. I think just the only point, just on your contribution, just the 30 hours a week is funded by Welsh Government, so there's no cost associated with anything up to 30 hours. Beyond 30 hours, there would be a cost. But up to 30 hours, that's funded through the Welsh Government. So there's not an additional cost associated with that. So that was my only point there, just for clarity for the committee, that's all. But thank you for that. I think that's I'm grateful to the committee for the opportunity, and I know that there was reasons why we've had to push it back into September, but it's been a good opportunity for us to hear committee members' views, and we'll reflect those now as we go forward and make sure that we capture your summing up in our report to Cabinet.
Okay, once again, Will, thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr. Said thank you for your time this morning. It is appreciated, I'm sure, by members here, but it's also appreciated, I think, by the wider community. As I've said more than once, it's a huge development. It's got to be right. It's not something that we can do on the hop. But once again, thank you very much. Okay, and thanks to members for all the contributions. We now move to agenda item 5, and we move to budget monitoring, and I think Nikki Wellington and Tyrone O'Sullivan are going to take us through. I don't know who's going to go first.
Thanks, Chair. I'll go first. Good morning, Chair and committee members. I'm here today with my colleague Nikki Wellington to present the 2021-22 forecast outturn for the council, but that is as at month 2. It's very early on in the year. It's only 2 months in, but we want to give some sort of assurance or financial information for you to scrutinise as members. It's on page 45 of your pack. I'll have to apologise in advance. It's not the usual format you're used to. We usually present you with a more fuller introductory report and then the appendices. However, we have just presented the appendices to you today, but that doesn't detract away from the fact that you've had all of the information that you would need in order to perform any scrutiny beforehand and ask any questions once we've done our presentation. But the appendices start at page 45. The first thing I want to draw your attention to is the fact that it is at month 2, very early on in the year, but we are forecasting a £9 million overspend on the Revenue Council budget as a whole. That's made up of £6.5 million of COVID-related pressures. They are detailed on pages 65 through to 81. The remaining £2.5 million is due to service budget pressures. In terms of this CYP Select portfolio, the element under my remit is the Children's Social Care budget, and that's forecasting an overspend of £1.127 million. Page 48 and through the top of 49 gives an explanation of the Children's Social Services overspend and is in 4 main distinct areas. Firstly, even though our children looked after numbers are reducing, which is a good positive outcome, new placements are having increased complexities and require high cost placements, which even though numbers are falling, we've got an increased overspend of 500,000 as a result. Secondly, a recent legal case has meant that we've had to realign the care rates we pay to our kinship carers to be that equal to foster carers rates, and that equates to £272,000 of that overspend. Thirdly, legal costs account for £238,000 of the overspend. And finally, the fourth element is the continued use of agency staffing, which amounts to the remaining £117,000 of the overspend. In terms of setting our budget for the year, we look at any savings that we can levy against service budgets. For the Children's Services Care revenue budget, there are no savings and there are no capital schemes as well pertaining to children's services. I'll take any questions at the end and I'll hand over to Nikki Wellington, who will be happy to go through the educational CYP and schools element of the report for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Tyrone. Nikki.
Good morning, members. Just to go through, as you said, CYP and schools elements. So we're starting off again on page 45. So just to report to members that CYP was 832,000 overspent as at month 2, which was May. The majority of this is down to ALN, as we've reported previously in various committees. The ALN spend overspend relates to, I'll just go through the various elements. So there was a 197,000 reduction in the recruitment income for our schools, for Central. There was 197,000 overspend in independence, and that related to additional pupils being placed in independent provision. 176 in pupils being placed in other local authority schools, and 223 overspend for support within our schools for pupils that are placed in Monmouthshire County Council schools. Of that 223, 164 related to new pupils coming into the system as of September 21. So that will be mainly reception pupils, which we've identified the needs early, but there will be other pupils that have come in different year groups. So if I now move on to the schools, so that is on page 60 of your pack. So just going through with the schools, the opening balance for schools was a surplus of 3,418,000. Members will recall that when I fed back on the year end, schools had several large grants that came in at the end of the year. So just to remember, there was 1.1 million relating to revenue maintenance. There was 670,000 relating to catch up for schools for the summer term. And that was in addition to the 215,000 that had already come into schools for catch up during the summer term. And on top of that, there was an additional 329,000 relating to post 16, which went to our secondary schools again for catch up. So there were significant balances at the end of the year. Schools are planning to spend 1.8 million, which will bring the surplus balances down to 1.6 million at the end of this financial year. We started the year with 2 schools in a deficit, Chepstow and Llandogo, and at month 2 we're reporting that the additional 2 of Ysgol Ifeni and Ysgol Ifin will go. We are forecasting deficit currently there. Okay, so I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Nikki, and thank you, Tyrone, for those reports and bringing us up to speed. Are there any questions or comments that people want to make?
Yes, please, Chair.
Yeah,
yes,
Councillor Easton.
I was going to ask you, Nikki, and Tyrone, about school deficits. I've declared my interest in Ysgol Ifin. We've got two Welsh medium schools now running into deficit. I didn't know that. I thought we were still just about in surplus. Could you expand a bit more on that, Nikki? And how can we get both these schools out of, well, all 4 schools, sorry, out of a deficit position? Because I understand that with the Welsh Government funding over the last 12 months, we managed to scratch away at a lot of deficits and finish up with surpluses.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Easton.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Easton. Yes, I'm more than happy to expand. In terms of Ysgol Ifin, as you are aware, as being a governor there, it is a small school, and we are finding with our small schools that the funding attracted through the formula doesn't always generate enough to support the fixed cost, should we say, of the school. So the formula will obviously, under the regulations, we have to give 70% out on pupil numbers. If the pupil numbers are less, then obviously any surplus made from those pupil numbers funding can't be offset against the premises costs and resources, etc., which would happen in a larger school. So there's always been, we do recognise that as a problem, but as I said, under the regulations, it is a minimum of 70% that needs to go out on pupil numbers. So it's something that we grapple with every year and do provide support, obviously, where in those circumstances. In terms of Ifeni, yes, that's looking to forecast a deficit at the moment. We are working very closely with that school, looking around staffing structures in that school, and as another member has mentioned earlier in the meeting, it is a growing school, it is an expanding school, so therefore there are a number of pupils that are coming into the school. But I do think that, a review of the staffing around that might help that deficit position for that school.
Okay.
I understand there's a finance meeting in this week, but I'm not on the finance committee. Okay, thank you, Nikki. Okay,
thanks. Any other questions or comments? No.
There's a couple of people asking to speak, Chair. I think Louise.
It's not coming through on my.
Louise and Joanne.
Sorry, Joanne, can you come in? Sorry. Say it's not coming up on my system at the moment.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I've got it now. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. It's actually mostly a comment because I know there is absolutely nothing that we can do about this, but I don't think I have ever sat through a CYP comment on finance in which Children's Services hasn't exceeded its budget because of obviously the terrible state of the fact that we have to look after these children and we can't necessarily predict when it's going to happen. So thank you for keeping on fighting the good fight, and I know that you do your best to try and get things to balance the budgets, but it is unfortunate that we do always seem to be struggling with the finances there. But it is just, I'm afraid to say, a very sorry state of the fact that children's services are always struggling at the moment because there are so many costs associated. But thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Watkins.
That is a good comment from Councillor Watkins. I'd just like to add a comment back to that. This just isn't solely a Monmouthshire issue, nor a Wales issue. This is a UK issue. It's been heavily publicised, I think about a month, 6 weeks ago, where you had councils like Wakefield, for example, where they just can't get provision for high cost placements, and it's a supply and demand. And these high cost providers, once you go to them and knock their door, they know that they are the last resort by the local authority. And we try as much as we can to reduce and negotiate those costs, but our powers are less strong than the provider. And then we do actively look through our MIST team, which is our multi-agency service strategy team, to try and boost that support in-house. So it's only a temporary measure. And then we try and move them back in county as much as we can. But that's not just solely on the grounds of finances. It's got to be right for the child, for example, as well, because we want to make sure that when we do bring them back in county, it does have a chance of succeeding. Again, another thing that sideswiped us was this legal challenge around kinship carers. And unfortunately, we've just had to realign the rates that we pay them to be that equal to what we pay our foster carers. That was just an unforeseen, but that was about a quarter of our overspend, which, like I said, we just couldn't even afford. Otherwise, we would have put a pressure when we were looking to do the budget for the year. Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Watkins, for your comment.
Thank you, Tyrone. Councillor Louise Brown.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Two questions, please. The first one for Nikki about well, it might be for both of you actually, about the school budgets for the secondary schools, because obviously at the end of the year, Chepstow unfortunately appears to have a deficit, whereas the other secondary schools are, with a basically, although it's in red on page 60, that's actually a credit. So if you could comment on that. And the second question was in relation to the ALN budget. You mentioned about sort of recruitment of income. I mean, obviously, when Lambton House School was going, then there was some income coming in. And could you explain what income comes in at the moment in terms of helping to balance the books? Because obviously there are quite a lot of costs with regard to other local authority schools and so forth. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Brown. Nikki, are you going to start, or?
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Brown. So if I start off with Chepstow, so Chepstow, you rightly point out, is in a deficit at the start of the year and continues in a deficit. Chepstow have faced a number of challenges around a staffing structure that they've been trying to put through. Unfortunately, it fell right when the pandemic hit. So the staffing structure has been delayed, or was delayed, the restructure, I should say. They have now implemented that and have started it from September of 2021. The savings will take a while to come through, but the increase in costs, obviously they faced another year of those higher costs, because at the point of time that they wanted to make those changes, we were in the middle of the pandemic, and unfortunately they couldn't make those changes. But yes, they're working to their recovery plan, and their recovery plan reflects that delay in terms of the timescales. If I go on to ALN, you rightly point out, Councillor Brown, that Mountain House received income for pupils that were placed in Mountain House from other local authorities. The income that we receive now is for pupils that are placed in other authorities into our mainstream schools. So primary and secondary have pupils that come in. We have a number of ALN units. We also have a number of pupils that attend our mainstream schools, and obviously we charge those other local authorities for the provisions that we provide in the school.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that answer. Any other issues or comments? No. Well, I don't. Is anybody else coming in? No, I can't see any hands up. Obviously, Nikki and Tyrone, I'd like to thank you both for that presentation, and obviously, again, particularly as far as schools are concerned, I don't think we've ever been in such a positive situation. And although 2 schools now have gone into deficit, we've only got 4, and I think not too long ago it was probably like 17. So obviously this has been the only plus, I think, of COVID in the sense that some of the help from Welsh Government has obviously helped schools to get into a better position, particularly as far as Tyrone's area is concerned in terms of children's services. I'm vice chair of corporate parenting, and I actually see it firsthand, you know, how that money is spent, and it's quite difficult, I think, in a meeting here when we're talking about sort of cold hard facts of money. But when you actually see, for lots of those children, the actual positive effects of the care that they receive, and you know, it is very much to the credit of children's services in this authority, and to people like Tyrone who have the terrible job of trying to balance an unbalanceable book, really, because children come in with particular needs and so on. But it's understandable that children's services is so difficult. It's impossible to budget, in the sense that some children might come from another authority or something happens in a particular home. But I know other members appreciate it as well, but I certainly appreciate the work that you both do. So thanks for those reports today, and I'll now move on. Thanks. Thank you. We go now then to the next agenda item, which is the Children and Young People Forward Planner. We've obviously got quite a full agenda next time on the 14th of October with the WESP, the Welsh Education Strategic Plan, and then also a return to school update. And I know members will be very interested in that. And then in December, free school meal strategy. So I really just present that, unless members want to come in. No. The Council and Cabinet Forward Plan.
Sorry, Chair.
Yeah.
I think in the pre-meeting we did discuss about having an update on Chepstow in January.
Sorry, I stand corrected. Thank you, Councillor Brown. Yes, we will be in January 2022. We will be looking for an update on what is happening to Chepstow Comprehensive School. So thanks for that reminder, Councillor Brown, and apologies for missing it. Agenda item 7, Council and Cabinet Forward Planner, purely for information. 8, to confirm the meetings of the meeting held on the 27th of May and the special meeting held on the 26th of June. Is somebody happy to accept those? Yes. Okay.
Chair, can I come in there a second? It's Councillor Chris Edwards. Thank you, Chris. First of all, thanks to Louise for just bringing that up about Chepstow and the 21st century schools for a discussion next year. With the last minutes of the last meeting, I'm not down as having sent my apologies. That was a meeting where I could only listen in. I had the wrong device. I could only listen in, but I couldn't speak.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Edwards. We'll correct that. Other than that, we'll accept both sets of minutes.
Yeah. I'll propose one if you want.
Sorry, will you propose that, Maureen?
Yeah, have you got a proposer for the minutes?
No, if you propose that, Maureen, is somebody happy to second?
Yeah, I'll propose them.
Yeah, I'll second it.
Louise will second, and I assume we accept that. There's no one dissenting. Okay, thank you. And then final item this morning, 9, the date and time of the next meeting. It is obviously at 10 o'clock on the 14th of October 2021, and we will obviously be, I assume, still on Teams. But thanks for your time and input this morning on on a very important agenda. And also thanks to all the officers.
What will be the process now with this school in Abergavenny? It's going to Cabinet in October. What's the process after that? Is there an appeal process, a follow-up process? Do we know?
Yeah, Will, would you want to pick that up?
Yeah, of course. So thanks, Councillor, and perhaps I should have touched on this earlier on. So goes to Cabinet in October, at the beginning of October. What the next stage then is that there is what we call the publication of statutory notices. So there's another period of time where people can statutorily object, and there's a range of reasons that you can do that, and we have to publish those notices, so you'll potentially see them, depending on what Cabinet decide, like on the fences of the schools, as well as obviously virtually and online and so on. So that then concludes just before Christmas, and then we'll come back to Cabinet to report on that stage of it, and then they make that final decision. So there's another stage to go. It's not a consultation process in the sense of us going out and talking to people. It's a process of us informing people of the decision. They then have an opportunity to object, but it's that level of objection at that point. So that's the next stage that we're about to go into.
So suggesting everything goes to your plan, for example, when would you put in spades in the ground, do you reckon?
Oh, so that's a slightly different line of work. So I think spades in the ground potentially will be, I think probably I would say late spring next year.
Okay. Thanks, because we're going off the agenda now. Thanks, Councillor Rees. Yeah, no, thanks, Will. I appreciate that. I hope we'll have somebody prestigious to actually, dig the first turf. Okay.
Well, Martin back.
Thanks all for your time and input this morning. It's a very important agenda, but we spent time scrutinising, and that is very important. Okay, I'll call the meeting to an end now, but thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you.